Now, I'm told on good authority that tomorrow we'll have more tea and coffee stations, so there won't be quite so much queuing, which is a mercy, but we're very grateful for what we've already received. And tonight, we're going to eat at a wonderful establishment just across the road called the Revolucion de Cuba. And it's a place on 2 floors. There's no seating plan, just sort of muck in with whoever you want to muck in with. But we're terribly grateful that tonight's dinner is provided by the Ecclesiastical Insurance Group. And can I say very cheekily, it's always very nice to get something back from your insurers. and we're deeply grateful to them. Now, the next part of the programme is the Newcastle case study. And as you see, you're in this building that's been drastically reordered and remodelled in response to a vision and a discernment of what the role of this cathedral should be in this city and this diocese. So here's the presentation from the Newcastle team, a cathedral learning to speak Geordie.
Good afternoon, everyone. See, I'm the Zacchaeus character, you see. So you can Well, I hope, with rain now wiped off and stotties being filling your bellies and the wonderful Northumbrian pipe music, you feel that you've been welcomed to Newcastle. But you are welcome. And if Newcastle's proud of anything, it's proud of its warmth and welcome. And I hope we live up to that, so help us, will you? But we want to tell you a little bit about our story.
Away, man, your macchiato's gone cold.
Citroën sponsors Dave, the French car that speaks your language.
A church has stood here on this site since the 11th century. I don't know where our Salisbury delegates are, but you're to blame because apparently it was your bishop that said we should have a church here. It's been a cathedral since 1882, yet it's still learning to speak the dialect of the community within which it is set. You know, in truth, I think it always will be learning, or at least it always should be. And the dialect it wants to speak is far more than cliches in Geordie, much more. It is a whole culture, a whole people, a way of life, a culture that's in a constant state of flux, a culture that refuses to stand still. Rather, it develops as its people change, as they absorb newcomers, adapt to new contexts and pressures, as they follow trends and, in some cases, struggle against them. Yet if a French car maker can do it, we believe we can too. David Bosch, in his classic study of missiology, used the following quote: "The divine word only speaks dialect." The divine word only speaks dialect. And here in Newcastle, we couldn't agree more. Trying to speak the gospel in this particular dialect has always been the task of this cathedral. Perhaps it's the task of every cathedral in their place. We at Newcastle, in our generation, are called and commissioned to do it in the here and the now. That's been what we've been about. Indeed, it's still what we're about. To do that, we've needed to treasure our past, to celebrate the present, and to nurture the future. But most of all, to learn to speak in a way that our people can hear the message of the gracious kingdom of God among us. For us, that demands we learn to speak fluent Geordie. Like all cathedrals, we are proudly unique. We share some of the characteristics of our sisters throughout the land. Not least you'll find in this cathedral, the cathedral of the diocese. You'll hear and experience a wonderful choral English church music. Here there'll be a daily rhythm of prayer. Here you'll come for the ordinations and the diocesan services and the civic celebrations and all the rest. Yes, of course. We're a newish diocese set in a region of rich and ancient Christian heritage. And unlike many cathedrals, though, we have no saint shrine here, no monastic foundation, no manicured lawns around us, no beautiful close for our clergy to live in. This cathedral sits in what might best be described as a roundabout. Close to the castle, next to the river. An oasis, but the peace is broken minute by minute by the city soundscape of sirens, reversing lorries, traffic engines, and of course people. I often think at morning prayer, you could say the Lord be with you and hear, this lorry is now reversing, this lorry is now reversing, in reply. And of course, it's full of people. Revelers, stag and hen do's. I'm impressed with all your costumes, by the way. You'll go down well in the stag and hen do, the kind of stories that you'll see tonight. Shoppers and skateboarders, office workers and construction sites. Just a few of them cross our threshold. All of them hear the bells. And many nod at the iconic lantern tower that we pass by. Just a few weeks ago, I was in hospital, in the Freeman Hospital here, and I was asked where I worked, and I said, there, because the curtains that go around every bay have a city landscape on. And what's the biggest thing on the landscape? Newcastle Cathedral Lantern Tower. For over 20 years, and in particular in the last 10, we've been acutely aware of the failings of the building and the impact that's had on our mission. We love this place, but in truth, it had been diminishing in front of our very eyes. Together, we have dreamt of a different way of being who we are, of opening ourselves to the city, a way of exposing and building upon our heritage, as well as finding new audiences, and of course, serving our community. A new vision has emerged amongst us. And that vision emerged from the values that we named together, and which have become for us the heart of our strategic planning. Our values are simple: to offer a radical welcome, to create inspiring worship, and to be a community that empowers worth. Working in this community with these construction sites would be our way, we believe, of making a sacred space become common ground. But how? In 2017, we had a major breakthrough, moving through stage 1 of a lottery bid and beginning to prepare a fuller stage 2 bid. We had the ingredients of a plan, some experienced staff. Now we prepared our application. We submitted it on time, which was in itself a miracle. It filled nearly a dozen large boxes with over 25 documents. Fortunately, the office of the regional lottery is just across the road. We carried it in procession. People hung out of the office windows, cheering us as we left, carrying all the boxes. And then we waited. And we waited. And we waited. 8 months later, nearly, we were awarded £4.3 million. And at the same time, we fundraised a further £2 million and then began to put those plans into some reality. Lucy, our volunteer coordinator, will pick up the story.
Thank you, Geoff. Our proposal to the Heritage Lottery Fund was that, as well as being a middle-sized place of worship, we would reposition ourselves as a first-class regional heritage destination in the heart of Old Newcastle. So there followed 6 months of intense design development before we went out to tender and appointed a local contractor, Historic Property Restoration, an exceptionally skilled team of stonemasons and joiners with a passion for old buildings. The key principles governing our project would be the removal of perceived barriers and real physical barriers, a light touch interventions and holistic inclusive design, flexibility to encourage a wide range of users and visitors, preservation, conservation, and environmental improvements, and activities built on volunteer engagement and partnerships, and operational and eventual financial resilience. In January 2020, we started with a great clear out and put the west end of the cathedral, where we're sat now, to bed. In February, we sold off 70 oak pews. In March, asbestos strips out began, and then lockdown struck. Through the next 16 months of the pandemic, the Dean wrote a blog, which we've published as his lockdown diary. Hot off the press, and retailing at a special conference rate available this week only, you can read of our determination to keep going. You can read of Geoff's theological musings and the progress we made. The old staff car park was replaced with re-landscaped churchyards to form a terraced seating and performance area and a relaxing space in the heart of the city. I don't think my clicker's working. Geoff, could you? Oh, we've gone too far. Never mind. We simplified access at the north and west entrances, removed steps from the font, and created a fully accessible new east entrance. I should have said the phrase, shouldn't I? Next slide, please. No, come on. We converted the basement under Cathedral Hall to a new suite of visitor washrooms, accessible shower, verger's workshop, sophisticated plant room, and a volunteer centre for training, breaks, and information sharing. The nave was reordered to provide flat access throughout, with the introduction of underfloor heating powered by air source heat pumps. At the same time, Chapter financed 4 new boilers, a refreshed lighting scheme, a state-of-the-art AV system, and the redecoration of St. Margaret's Chapel. Over 150 ledger stones, 60 being new discoveries previously hidden by the pews, and each one over 1 ton in weight, were recorded, relocated, and conserved. Our 14th century knight effigy was cleaned and relocated. The medieval font was rebuilt after Civil War damage and centred on decorative paving. The monumental First World War painting of St. George and the Dragon was cleaned for the first time since 1915. As we drew closer towards reopening and our rededication service on the 25th of July 2021, there was a frenzy of activity. Gantt charts, to-do lists, items on order, contractors and subcontractors all vying for time on site. Branded destination signage, retail units and shop stock, old furniture previously stored off-site, and 600 new chairs and benches, which you're sitting on today, were delivered. Colours were unfurled, font canopy uncovered, monuments and furnishings reinstated. We cleaned, and we cleaned, and we cleaned, and we cleaned again. Kate, our Chief Operating Officer, masterminded operational health and safety, risk assessments, fire drills, and visitor operations. Whilst Lucy, oh, that's me, recruited and trained up volunteers emerging from lockdown, and you can see some of our new recruits here with us this week. The choir returned just in time for practice, and in over 30 preview tours, afternoon teas, and dinners, we welcomed stakeholders, advocates, and funders. Our Learning Activities Officer prepared Safe Spaces, an art installation co-curated with Crisis Skylight clients for our August launch exhibition. This will be accompanied by a programme of summer holiday events marketed under the strapline, "See Us in a New Light." And the Cathedral team put the finishing touches to multimedia heritage interpretation. Don't miss the Newcastle Beatitudes Trail around the grounds, our illuminated stories in the stones, or our current exhibition dedicated to survivors of church abuse. I'll leave you now by playing a short clip from our Ledgerstone audio light show, which captures the spirit of how we've tried to provide touch points with past people connected with St. Nicholas's and who also helped make the city what it is today. The Cathedral's stories touch on sanctuary, conflict, slavery, wealth, global issues which touch us all locally and which can be debated safely in this sacred space. I think you need to press again, Geoff.
And a decent, secure burial. I'm not having my body dug up for the anatomists. Oh, forgive me. So much to do as I prepare to meet my maker. Nathaniel Bales, surgeon, inventor, troublemaker, some say, but a good man, I hope. I've treated the poor without charge, saved the town more for Newcastle people and cows, called out corruption at St. Nicholas's, earned a patent from King George himself for my whaling harpoon, and seen my Margaret well married to a ship owner like me. My ships cross the seas for whalebone and warfare and workers. Mind, if the abolitionists have their way, we'll not be carrying slaves for much longer.
One of the keys to all that we learned was that the glory or the treasure of this cathedral is the stories of the people it holds. That's why we try to tell those stories in as many ways as we can. And one of our hopes is that everyone who comes here is greeted personally by someone from here to say welcome every day, at every moment. Because we were always convinced that we were about more than refurbishing a building, it would be crucial to have a building that exploited our heritage and resourced us into a different future. But we knew that we needed more than anything a transformation of the whole way of being a cathedral and who we were. If we were to speak Geordie with any competence, that must be the order of the day. You see, for us, in the end, our values and vision have become the foundation of what we've tried to create. John Canassa, who works in our Lantern initiative, will tell us something about what it means here to be radically welcoming.
Good afternoon. Can I just echo Geoff's welcome, and that is knowing that many of you stood outside for the best part of half an hour in the pouring rain and unable to get into the building. So I already feel like I'm on the back foot with radical welcome. I'm also aware when you put the word radical in front of anything, people, might perceive it as being a cheap attempt to sort of be a bit cool or edgy. And that's not what we're trying to do here. In the words of Geoff, our dean, that you'll see in the programme, we're learning to practice a radical welcome. So, we're getting it wrong, but I think there's a real commitment from everybody that's involved in the cathedral, the volunteers, the vergers, the office staff, the clergy, the congregation, everybody involved, to the values that Geoff's talking about. Now, my job title, which I have to explain to people, Lantern Initiative Lead, is taken from the Lantern Tower behind me. In centuries gone by, a fire was lit at the top of that tower as a beacon to the city, and it was at one point the tallest building in the city. Boats would navigate up the Tyne in the dark by its light, and drawing on this analogy, the Lantern Initiative seeks to be a beacon of hope for people, for visitors who are navigating dark or difficult times in life. And what we're trying to do is to create spaces of belonging with people. Very briefly, two aspects, and there are many, but two aspects of radical welcome for you. Radical welcome looks around to see who is not here. It compels us to go out beyond our doors into the wider city to make connections and partnerships with individuals and with organizations. And if we're serious about offering hospitality to everyone, then we need to actively seek out and walk alongside those individuals and groups that have previously been alienated by the church and by wider society. And as a result of us going out and meeting groups, one of the things that's happened is we found ourselves with a singing group. That wasn't what we were expecting. We just went out and listened to people. We invited them to come here to share this fantastic space, the community as well as the building. And in those conversations, a number of different groups said, could we do some singing in the cathedral? So we've ended up with this singing group called the Altogether Different Singing Group. And it's made up of people who are in wheelchairs, who are differently abled, people who are homeless, people who have struggles with their mental health, people who are in addiction struggles. And what we do is we just sit at the transect and we just sing, all of us together. And you know what? We actually sound great. There's no one more surprised than me. But we sound terrific. We're normally in a circle where the cross is at the transect. We had a moment where there was a guy who is known to the cathedral here who just walked up when we were singing and just joined in. Oh, it was a real moment. He said he can never be in one place for more than a couple of minutes because of his mental health and his anxiety. But he comes into the cathedral because it's a place where he feels he can encounter sanctuary and a welcome. And he says when his head's going, when he's got noises in his head, he comes in here for peace. And he just came and joined us for one of the songs, and the words were, "This is my home, this is where I belong." And he was stood next to me singing the harmony it was just a moment. I mean, he drifted off after we'd done the song. But that, in a nutshell, that's what it looks like. And then the second thing is radical welcome will stretch us. Because it recognizes that all of us people have blind spots. And that sometimes we operate out of our fears and our prejudice. And that we can be too quick to judge and to rescue people. Our staff and our volunteers have done training around how we do welcome. And it involves looking at our own unconscious bias and our insecurities. It looks at rescue and behavior in the drama triangle. It looks at personal safety and boundaries and trauma-informed environments, how we can respond to people, how we can respond to conflict, and how we can be practical with that response. Through the work that we've been doing, we met with a group of women who've been through the criminal justice system and involved in survival sex. And then, as a result of their past, their collective experiences have been impacted by being judged by others, by being denied access to certain opportunities, and they carry a deep-rooted sense of not belonging. The trauma and abuse that these women have been exposed to throughout their lives unsurprisingly means that they highly value feeling safe, and they're highly attuned to the environment that they're in. And their experiences of the cathedral as a place of sanctuary, where they were affirmed simply for who they are, has resulted in a storytelling project that these women themselves are leading on. Because we are practicing to learn radical welcome, we get it wrong. And one of the women expressed a desire to become a volunteer welcomer. Our recruitment policies necessitate that we have to do checks and risk assessments and disclose certain information about an individual's past. Now, some of this was painful to put down on paper, and it had the effect for her of triggering painful memories. And despite our best efforts to do this sensitively, reflecting on this with them afterwards resulted in the kind of offer, like a kind offer that they made to say, well, I think I could help to do that differently. So they are teaching us, they are showing us how to do this, because we don't know, and we need them to help us to do it. So there's something around the fact that that's going to be a little bit messy and it's going to take time and energy, but that's what we're here for, is to spend time and energy in that way, where both parties are invested in creating something new together, and where both parties are blessed by it. Thank you.
So hospitality, as you've gathered, is crucial to us. It's at the very beat of our heart. But that doesn't take away our deepest desire and calling to be a place of community of people who worship together. So we've searched for excellence, for inclusivity, for relevance, but also for the widest understanding of worship that we could muster. Canon Claire McLaren will take us on to tell you how we've gone about our task.
We live in an era where, as they say, it's all about the optics. What people see when they gather for worship in a cathedral is just as important as what they hear. And the advent of live streaming worship has brought this into ever sharper focus, hasn't it? You can see from the image behind me that our Sunday congregation doesn't normally sit anyway like how you're sitting today, but in collegiate style, with everyone sitting on either side of the cathedral, facing one another across the wide aisle of the nave. This encourages a sense of community for those who choose to sit near the front, while those who prefer can still linger at the back. But it also facilitates the journey of our Eucharistic liturgy. Our focus begins at the font, which you can't actually see because someone's put a big screen up. We're recalling our baptism. We confess our sins. The ministers and the focus then move to the lectern in the middle of the nave for the opening of the word. And then the focus moves to the altar at the crossing for the breaking of the bread. As we all do, of course, we strive for dignity, beauty, and excellence in our worship, but we also consciously aim to offer a broad and inclusive banquet of prayer, music, and symbolic action, which honors the diversity of our congregations and encourages them to contribute and not simply to consume. As you will experience during the course of this week, we aim to celebrate the best of Northeast culture in our worship. You will hear prayers set to the beautiful, yearning melody, The Water of Tyne. The choir will sing a translation from the Old Northumbrian of Cadman's song, the oldest surviving piece of English poetry, written for our choirs by local composer John Caskin. We shall share in our midday offices in liturgies from the Northumbria community, just up the road near Holy Island. During the reordering, we've also had the opportunity to commission a suite of liturgical furniture, which echoes not just the colours, textures, and timbre of the cathedral, but celebrates the industrial, seafaring, technological, urban, and rural traditions of this land. The image behind me gives you an impression of our new altar and ambo, designed by a firm of designer fabricators based here in the city of Newcastle. Using cutting-edge computer-aided design technology and 3D printing, the altar and ambo will be cast from aluminium and were inspired by the shapes of seafaring vessels and also the mining heritage of the region. Like a geode, which splits in two, the dull outer stone revealing a glittering and beautiful inner world. We hope that these bold pieces will invite those who join us for worship to see what treasures a closer look at our Christian faith might reveal. By contrast, on either side of us, here on the podium, you'll see new flower stands, handcrafted by a blacksmith in rural Northumberland. Her design is reminiscent of the railway lines that converge on Newcastle, the metalwork of the Tyne Bridge. And the helix shape is a reminder of this city's place at the heart of medical and scientific advances over the years. The rich blue glass set into the stands. And if you look at the choir stalls a little later, the enamel crosses set into them honour the ancient glass-making traditions of the Northeast. And there's so much more I'd love to share If only I had the time. They've talked for longer than me, so I'm just going to say one more thing. When you look at the choir stalls, they only arrived on Friday, so we're just working out how to use them. You'll see a wave along the front. The choir stalls are made of a material called Richlight, which is the great-granddaughter of Formica, which is a Newcastle firm. Very firm, very solid, as we've discovered, extremely heavy. But if you look at the wave formation along the front, that's actually the very first millisecond of the opening to choral evensong. O Lord, open thou our lips. The wave sound built into the choir stalls. End of diversion. As we all know, almost every element of our wonderful cathedrals has a story to tell, doesn't it? Here at Newcastle, as we celebrate God's story, in the story of this city and in our own stories as they unfold, we are creating new stories for future generations to share. Thank you.
It's a brave move letting everyone speak, wasn't it? You could be here all night, couldn't you? But it's good because this is how we work, really, and I think that reflects that, I hope, in what you're seeing. For us, though, welcome and worship only form two parts of the triad of values that we agreed together as a staff and as a community would underpin what we do. And the third we articulate as empowering worth. This empowering worth cuts across all the streams or underpins them. We, in short, aim to make every contact we have with someone one that makes the other and ourselves feel better about who we are. It's proved to be a good litmus test to all our encounters, even the challenging ones. And because it's challenging, I've asked Peter Dobson to carry on the story.
We arrived at this sense of being called to prioritizing, empowering one another and all with whom we have to do here in their God-given innate sense of worth by many routes, it would be fair to say. An important route being, though, that being radically welcoming is one thing, but what next? What's after the radical welcome? As John has said, part of the way we want to extend that welcome is to welcome learning and new insights, to be a people on the way, moving and growing together, informed, as Claire's just said, by our prayer and worship. We want to continually ask the question, how the people and the circumstances God is giving us in this place are to be cherished as a gift and used for good. We've already heard some stories, and I'm afraid there's a few more from me about prison, people, the public square, and the importance of partnerships in how we're learning to be an empowering place. The first of those is having had, because of where we are, a long ministry to the real city on our doorstep, particularly those experiencing acute moments of vulnerability, having good and long-standing relationships here with folks from the street life community, those struggling with addiction, and being a safe haven for many experiencing times of mental ill health. We began to be aware in the middle of all of that just how many of the people who make up parts of those communities and an important part of the communities that make up this place were also prison leavers, and just how some struggles of theirs were based in not being able to find work or meaningful ways to use gifts and skills because of the stigma histories of offending still have. At the very same time, some of us were pondering how we might best use our refectory and kitchen after the opening of the redeveloped cathedral It's not been easy always to make those places work here. You'll read in your conference pack, though, how this has led to us forming a partnership, committing resources, raising funds together to open a satellite cafe of a cafe based in HMP Northumberland, with a mentoring scheme, volunteer and work placement opportunities, with employed posts for 3 or 4, depending on the time, prison leavers, and 2 staff to mentor and train them. The baked goods that you've just enjoyed, the wonderful cakes, are all made in a bakery that this partnership also runs in the prison. My favourite moment from the time that we've had Cafe 16 here was the moment when, hosting the legal service, these lads realised they were catering for the very people that had put them in prison. One meeting 2, not just 1, 2 judges that had sent him there. Our value of empowering worth serves to challenge us, though, when we stop learning from one another and truly co-creating the future God has for us here. Even as John said, when there's a strong commitment to being with people and not doing unto them, it seems to me in the church, maybe especially at present, we can be tempted to want to prove our worth at the cost of others, to look busy, to create programs, put on activities. Well, we only want to do that here by doing it together. You've heard about the singing group. Another example would be the Cathedrals Recovery Church and its great supporter, who you might recognise there. This is something which has emerged from our being with those struggling with substance use, which has become problematic, of connecting with other partners in the city and rehab facilities, with a group of people who gather here who've asked for a way to intentionally explore their recovery in the light, in many cases, of a new or a rediscovered Christian faith. If you heard the Radio 4 broadcast of Sunday worship from here yesterday, you'll have heard how it is at the heart of our wanting to be a place of empowerment that partnerships are to us, how we want to take our place and continue to find the voice that is ours alongside others in the city. In recent times, we've been able to find a way for the voice of lived experience we know well here, and for the place the Cathedral has in city life, to help the City Council think around new policies affecting the street life community. And just 2 weeks ago, we were spending time with some of those who spend their time here in recovery, with a group of national charities and ecumenical partners, setting up a new faith-based symposium on rethinking drug policy and Christian ethics. Being at the heart of the city, historically, and we pray, of course, into the future, on a day when the weather's better than it's been today, you might like to explore a ribbon of words that are outside the east entrance and in the south churchyards. We think of it like a ribbon which would hold a parcel or a gift together in a neat bow, if you're one of those people who can do that. Mine just turned into a big knot. The words on this ribbon, though, are words which, when we were creating our values together, were words that seem to crop up again and again. Things which, living out our values, we hope that people would recognize here. I always say on our weekly tours of the cathedral that if you find any word on that ribbon that you don't recognize, that you haven't seen lived out, or that you don't feel when you're here, you have to tell us, because then the ribbon is unraveling. God's gift here is not all that it could be. It was hugely moving this last Christmas at the Crisis Carol service to discover that someone struggling with homelessness and addiction had come to find his sense of home here initially by first of all walking that ribbon and the Newcastle Beatitudes again and again and again. he had written down the 120 plus words, cut them all up, put them in a bag, and wrote a poem with the first 12 that had come out of the bag, a poem he wrote for the Crisis Carol service. That same person today, housed, sober as he wanted to be, flourishing, confirmed here this Easter, is now one of the leaders of our Recovery Church and one of the members of this National Symposium on Drugs Policy. It's his words I'm going to end with, at least part of the beginning of his poem, before we hear a bit more from some other voices. From Des. To value life based on the shadows of our former self, finding faith not to use the past to damage the future self. The beauty of the gift of life, a present constantly unwrapped each day, in a place of worship deep in the heart of our city with open doors. Hospitality from charity to all we serve, using the experiences from our shadowy past to offer inclusivity to all the outcast. Thank you.
Community.
Friendship.
Moras or pulse.
Love.
Vibrant. Indrukwekkend.
Inspiring.
Refuge.
Majestuosa.
Illuminating.
Happiness.
Sacred. Spiritual.
Welcome.
Challenging. My home.
So this is our story. Well, the one we can tell so far, because it changes every day. We add to it. I'm not sure in any sense we could say we've got there, but we know we're not alone. In the city, we've made many allies. We've developed partnerships across every sector of the city, and we celebrate our non-monopoly of the good. We celebrate our non-monopoly of the good. Our close neighbours in the heritage sector, in the universities, in the business chamber and its members, local arts groups, schools, orchestras, performers, they're our friends. They're our co-workers with whom we joyfully share our work. A thriving cathedral serves and works a thriving city. We are co-creators, never mavericks. To our joy, some people just get what we're about. They've understood that we do not just want to create a destination, even less a gathered church. We don't even just want to blur the boundaries between the so-called religious and secular. We want to blast them apart. For we believe, in truth, that boundary does not exist. There is no simple in and out of the kingdom of God. And we know God is at work in the whole caboodle that we're part of, with everyone and among us. Indeed, God has no favoritism. It is with those who get pushed out that we want to spend even more time, those who live outside our city walls. It's in our desire to keep widening these contacts, our reach, year by year, week by week, and we took the risk of working with a partner on a new venture recently called Comedy in the Cathedral. It provoked much criticism. You can see it in my email box. Telling jokes in church? God forbid. In his Guardian column, celebrity David Mitchell of Would I Lie to You? Do you know who I think? Yeah. Totally unsolicited from us, because we don't know him at all, came to our defense. And in doing so, he succinctly formulated in his own style and articulated our whole mission. He wrote this: I'm not very religious, but I'm not an atheist. I'm a don't know. I hope there's a nice big God, and I hope I find myself believing in one when I expire, but I don't reckon thinking about it a lot is going to give me the answer. I like churches, though. I find them both calming and moving, a combination of rarely achieved TV drama. I'm extremely pleased when I go into a cathedral. To me, the troubled, thoughtful, well-meaning fogginess of the Church of England feels truthful, more comprehensible, a sane reflection of how the human condition feels than all those dynamic philosophies. Other religions may have retained their fiery naivety of youth, but the Anglican Church has that mild, tolerant befuddlement of experience, which is the closest thing to wisdom I'll ever believe in. And he doesn't even speak Geordie. Does the cathedral speak Geordie? After 900 years, it's still learning. Does God speak Geordie? Why, aye, man.
Now, he's going to give you signed copies later. Yeah. That was definitely worth the train fare, Geoff. Thank you very much indeed for sharing that amazing story of the way you've thought things through, from first principles to realizing this amazing vision. And we're all very humbled to be in your company and grateful for the courage and the determination you brought to it. We're going to pause just for a moment so you can have a leg stretch, and at 5 o'clock I want to introduce you to some special people who will be helping us with the conference itself. I've not yet introduced you to our House of Bishops observer, the Bishop of Lichfield, who's observing me at close quarters. We've also got our conference chaplain, Eugenia Peters, and I want to introduce you to one or two other people also. But stretch your legs for a bit, and we'll get going again. Also, we'll get Gannon just after 5 o'clock. Okay, thank you.